There is no lack of cybersecurity vendors, but why are we so focused on tooling when the most persistent problems in cyber are not technical?
You're listening to Defense in Depth.
Welcome to Defense in Depth. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of the CISO series, and joining me as my co-host, one of my favorites, one of yours, it's Eddie Contreras, Senior EVP and CISO over at Frostbank. Eddie, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience, and David, thank you for having me back yet again.
We love having you back. For those of you who are not aware, this is just one of 5 shows we have on the CISO series. Go check us out at CISOseries.com, and you could check out some of our wonderful programming. Please subscribe and listen to all of it. Our sponsor for today's episode is ActiveState, fuss-free open source, managed and secured for you across any language and delivery method you need. The result? Innovation-focused devs and a more secure software supply chain. That's ActiveState. Guess what? We will be talking about them a little bit more later in the show. But let's talk about today's topic first, Eddie. Joe Head of Relic Solutions looked at the vendor landscape and found that while every category has dozens of vendors, if not hundreds, we're not addressing essential gaps. As to what are the biggest issues in the vendor-customer need matching game, Joe Head names tool sprawl, user hostile security, neglected SMBs, a lack of an ROI story, and no go-to-market strategy. So I know you've heard of all of these, Eddie. Why do these gaps persist in what seems like a competitive market? Shouldn't we have a solution by now?
What a great quote to start us off, right? If you think about that. Tooling is a chapter in the story, not the whole story, or even the final exam, right? Essentially, gaps are different not only between industries, but companies within the same industry, why this is so complex. So, what's the answer? We're about to find out, hopefully, right?
We'll answer all your problems and all your concerns about your security infrastructure and your security on today's show. Not too much pressure on our guest today. It is the CISO and VP of Digital Technology Services for Marathon Petroleum Corporation. It is Mary Rose Martinez. Mary Rose, thank you so much for joining us.
So happy to be here and join both of you.
And let me make clear to our audience that everything Mary Rose says here is her own personal opinions. They don't necessarily reflect the company that she works for.
What's everyone obsessed about?
Mark Furman of Ingram Micro said, quote, "I work with partners and SMB customers all the time who feel utterly priced out, overwhelmed, and frustrated with the space. SMB is the majority of businesses in this country. They are crucial vendors in critical infrastructure supply chains. Yet, there's only a handful of companies that focus on these customers. We have to do better here." Oh my God, I hear this story all the time. And Jeremy Turner, CISO of Pady, said, quote, "I once left a Fortune 50 to a 3-5 fintech startup thinking it would be a walk in the park. Many established IT vendors, as well as startups, don't want to spend time on SMBs. I had to negotiate, beg, and plead my ass off just to even get on a call." That is how neglected SMBs are. How do you feel? I'm sure you have customers that are SMBs, yes. I mean, your bank has them, yes. You have to treat them well, don't you?
You do, right? I mean, they're a significant portion of revenue, but man, one of the challenges from moving from a large organization to a smaller one, it's embracing the concept of multiple hats. When you think of a leader at a small company, you kind of have to have this MacGyver mentality, right? Meaning, what do I have at my disposal? What's within arm's reach? Great, I can make it work. Versus a leader at a large company where often you dictate expectations and assumptions, and you can give mandates, and you have an army of people to deliver. Now, both of them work, but you have to be able to understand what can be successful in your organization to make it work for you based on the capabilities that are available to you.
Agreed. All right. Let me ask you, Mary Rose, have you worked in an SMB before?
So I have not had the luxury of working at an SMB, but I highly agree with some of the statements made here. SMBs are not only the critical infrastructure, make up our supply chain. They're not only the majority of businesses in this country, they actually make up roughly half of our GDP. And same thing globally, right? They roughly make up half of countries' GDPs. And again, Mark Furman is spot on. SMBs impact the supply chain of larger companies. So while I've only worked at larger companies, I've had the downstream exposure of SMBs not having the correct cyber services, the correct cyber tooling, with trust being an attack vector. Supply chain attacks are essentially a force multiplier. So think SolarWinds, one company, 18,000 organizations, our own included, all the big organizations included, MoveIt, etc. Again, there is a dearth there. And I certainly empathize with Jeremy Turner's quote, because it shouldn't be that way. They are a market. There should be services and tools for them.
The problem is, I think the vendors create their pricing models or create their business models that they can't afford sometimes to work with SMBs because they don't have the bandwidth to manage it, meaning that maybe the product requires too much management. And if they take on too many SMBs, they won't be able to deal with it.
Let's go back to Eddie's comment, though, right? They need to understand that their customers in this case are people who are wearing multiple hats. So understanding that, what is good enough service? What is good enough technology for these folks? Don't give them a platinum service. Figure out what other levels there are.
And I like what Mary said when it came to like the industry. And that's the power of the SMB area. Most CISOs, and I'm sure Mary Rose knows this, most CISOs have direct, if not immediate, access to other CISOs. Work in numbers. Be influential together. If you can get a market segment to agree, are you willing to negotiate on this? Because I'm not. And there comes a consensus. You can influence the numbers, but it takes that network. It takes that professional network to do that.
Let me ask, have either of you ever been able to coalesce multiple CISOs to negotiate? Yes?
We have, well, there are rules of the game, but we do share insights. We do share strategy sometimes, but there's a anti-compete, right? You cannot actually do that.
But you can talk about who's easy to work with and who isn't.
You can certainly talk about what's important to each other. What are the areas that matter most? And is there like a service offering that's not there that you need to be there and you can influence the product direction, even the roadmap? And so, yeah, absolutely. You might not be able to talk numbers, but you can absolutely talk what's important to the SMB market.
What's the ROI?
Dan Huckle of Principal Network said, quote, ROI is a tricky conversation to have with potential customers, especially those who haven't been breached. You're basing an ROI on a hypothetical, albeit very likely, situation as opposed to something tangible like a new machine making widgets. Shamsheer Khan, CISO of FN Cyber, said, quote, every product in the market says it will do A to Z, but a business translation of this statement doesn't exist. This is where someone needs to step in and explain to them, I feel there is a vacuum in this area. Vendors make big claims, companies want ROI, but things don't always fit nicely, do they, Mary Rose?
No, they do not. But frankly speaking, it's the CISO's responsibility to determine ROI for their business. They're the ones who understand the business that they serve. They're the ones who understand the risk tolerances. They're the ones who understand the value that needs to be added. No, don't get me wrong. The vendors can provide templates. They can provide thought starters. They can provide things that could possibly result in an ROI. But honestly, that's not a vendor's problem or a vendor's responsibility. It is the CISO's responsibility. Every business is different. They need to determine what the value is for their business. Now, I will have to say, it's not always about a hard ROI. Cyber is largely a risk management function. And so you could actually look at it through a risk lens as well. So think risk tolerance, think business continuity, think outcomes. Gartner, for example, has outcome-driven metrics. So you can demonstrate or propose initiatives value through those lenses, not necessarily a hard financial number.
Right. And one of the things that one of the other co-hosts of the show, Steve Zalewski, says all the time is, how does this help me sell jeans? Now, you don't need to show me that getting this product will generate this much more revenue, but you can show that this will facilitate the process. So if you can show me that this makes things easier for us to sell jeans, he used to work for Levi Strauss, then that has value that can be seen.
Absolutely. Just think business continuity. And even that can be sliced into so many variables, right? What is the loss of operations? How quick can we recover from a cyber perspective? All that has value, and you can talk about it in terms of tolerances for the business, not necessarily the ROI. It'll eventually lead to a number, but you can talk about it in those terms.
All right, Eddie, I throw this to you. Let me ask you, you do get this ROI question. Mary Rose pointed out, like, there's a lot of other things we can talk about, business continuity and stuff. I know you know this. Like, what are sort of the advice to our audience, like, when they get hit with the ROI, like how much money we're going to make, or is this worth our time? How do you kind of craft that? And what do you suggest to our audience?
I think Mary Rose hit a home run. You can't put that on the vendors. That's the CISO to make the determination.
But you could work with a vendor saying, I need to communicate the value of your product to my team. Like, help me understand how this is going to help our processes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And vendors will work with you, right? But they don't come with the answer. You tell them, what's the story you want to give? So, for example, if your company focuses on JD Power Awards and their number one priority is customer service, you can't go to the board and tell them, hey, we just invested $1 million to reduce our mean to detect time by 40%. Now, the audience right now is going to be screaming, oh my God, amazing stat. That's phenomenal. Well, guess what? Does that translate to ROI to the board? If you come in asking for another $1 million, is the board going to say, well, what did I get besides a mean time to detect? They won't even know what that means. But if you come back and you say, we just invested $1 million in our call center, helping them upgrade to a new infrastructure that ensures our contact center is reachable 24 hours a day, and we can get real-time net promoter scores from that system, they get behind that. Now, they may not know there was vulnerabilities. They may not know you were patching because you were versions behind or tech debt, but you're talking what ROI means to the board. And that's why I think Mary Rose said, you got to define that. And the vendor can help you get there. They can help you tell that story, but you have to articulate that first so you can build that story behind it.
You and your VP of engineering are both dealing with fires right now, and you're likely not even using the same words to describe them. In the engineering bullpen, a feature just slipped a quarter. Not because of a hacker or a breach. The culprit is a dependency nobody chose, sitting in a codebase nobody fully audited, attached to a CVE that surfaced in stand-up and disappeared just as fast. Back down the hall, you're sitting with a question your board hasn't even asked yet, but it will. Can you demonstrate control over your software supply chain in a world where AI is writing the code? Same vulnerability, different risk to the business. ActiveState built the answer to both. A curated OSS catalog, 79 million open source components across 12 language ecosystems, built from source, verified, governed. Your developers get a fast lane. You get the audit trail. When the board question comes, and it will, you won't need to scramble. You'll have had the answer this whole time. It's ActiveState. Check them out at ActiveState.com. And it's spelled just the way it sounds, ActiveState.com. And when you go, let them know that you heard about them from the CISO series.
What aspects haven't been considered?
Rave M of EFT Consultants said, quote, most security tools are still designed from the top down. They reflect what vendors want to control, not what users actually experience. That's why so many of them feel clunky, overbuilt, or disconnected from real workflows. Now, what if security felt more like clarity, quiet, adaptive, and built to glide, not overwhelm? The tools aren't the problem. The philosophy is. This gets into a big UX UI discussion too, I would say. But let's see what Lee Hadlington of Nottingham Trent University said, quote, I cannot help but wonder, though, is it less about tools and more about understanding? Understanding the root causes of the problems means that a more direct pathway to solutions can be generated. Understanding the needs and requirements of the customer means that they are being sold snake oil and are being offered efficient products and advice, and understanding that technology isn't always the answer. I'm sure you've been pitched without them having a clue what your needs are. Yes, Eddie?
I got a closet full of snake oil and it's phenomenal,
Yeah.
right? The quote from Rave, it sounds like Zen utopia, right? The perfect non-friction based, super quiet, delivers to all my needs. it's not there. Right?
That sounds great.
It's not there.
And as a security professional, you would love it if security was invisible.
Well, exactly. Who wouldn't, right? That is the utopia, right? But you have to think about this in a way of a partnership with the vendor. It would be so nice if they just sat and saw what you did. Have you done a demo for them? Here's my current process. Are you the same, just with a different UI? Or are you actually solving something? Do you hear my pain points? So I'm not a big fan of let me hear your 20-minute pitch of where you originated from. Let me tell you my pain point. Are you a part of this conversation? And I don't mind spending an hour for that if it saves me time and then saves them time potentially as well. But at least you know you are or not buying snake oil.
But also, I would assume that what's valuable is when they come to you saying, I worked with another bank or I worked with another utility or something, and these were their problems. Are those similar to yours too? Then you can nod your heads, because I know like trying to get you to reveal, like say, well, this is what's happening in our organization, not something you're really eager to do. So if they can sort of initiate the story, that might be a good opening. What do you think, Eddie? Yes? No?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. But and every vendor comes with a really good use case, but every company operates differently. And so even in the financial sector, what works for Chase may not work for me. What works for one university may not work for the next. So sometimes you do have to get up close and personal.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand, but I guess it's an icebreaker at least. And then they can ask how close or far off are we, kind of a thing. What's been your experience in terms of vendors understanding? I guess there's different levels. Vendors understanding and your willingness to explain what's going on. There's got to be some level of trust that's built, right, Mary Rose?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't blame vendors who are coming in essentially cold calling, because to your point, we don't just open up the kimono to just about everybody. But likewise, if they do come in with at least having done a bit of research, knowing a little bit about our industry, the size of our company, where we operate, they can at least pitch me something that's a little more custom to my organization before and it's really the start of the building that trust, right? Versus them coming in with a blank slate and say, hey, I've got this magic hammer that will fix all of your solution, all of your problems. So has to be some work to that effect. Now, again, I would admit that it is difficult to break into any organization just with a cold call. But that certainly would be helpful. From the CISO side of the house, yes. I mean, like Eddie mentioned, yeah, it would be nirvana if everything was very smooth and there was no friction whatsoever. But unfortunately, that's not necessarily what security is about, right? I mean, we are trying to do that as frictionless as possible, but certainly there are areas of opportunity for improvement. At the end of the day, it's back to understanding our business in my mind, right? Again, cyber does not exist for cyber's sake. I keep trying to say this. We are always in service of the business we're trying to protect. So like I'm saying, vendors should sort of understand where our industry is and where your companies, where your business is. We, as cyber professionals, need to understand what are the user personas? What are their work processes? What are their environments? Not just technology, but physical. Are they out in the field? Are they in an air-conditioned office? In order to understand truly, what am I trying to protect, and what tooling, back to the frictionless, would be more amenable or would be more appropriate for my users while trying to accomplish the cybersecurity objectives that we have. It's a balance, honestly, on the different factors that factor in. There's literally, in my mind, both an art and a science to cyber. It's not just tooling. It's having to understand all these nuances that I just mentioned.
Have either of you had a vendor do the equivalent, I guess, of a ride-along to see what it's like in your environment?
Yeah, I could start and say, yes, I have. But to your point, not a new vendor.
Right. I would assume it's somebody who's already been hired. Yes.
Yeah, it's somebody that I have an established relationship with. You have a product, you know something, there's a new SKU or a new module. I'm going to talk more about that than, the cold call. And Mary Rose is right. You can't tell everybody everything, but you can have open and honest conversations with trusted partners. And a lot of our vendors are trusted partners. If you think of a lot of the partners that service an entire industry, they probably know, a good 60 to 70% of your operating model. So those ones absolutely can share. Mary Rose, I'm sure, has some thoughts on this as well.
It's similar in our case. It is the trusted partners and the trusted vendors. For point number one, what I just mentioned, they know many other people in the industry. And I actually always talk about my partners and vendors and say, bring me the ideas. You know other people in either same or parallel industries, same or similar company profiles. How are they addressing X, Y, and Z problem? Give me those ideas. That makes them even more valuable partner and or vendor. But then let's go back to the supply chain attack we just talked about earlier. There's a reason we have trusted vendors. It's because we need to build those relationships because we are codependent. And so back to, again, like I said, whether it's supply chain attack, whether it's creativity and innovation, we become codependent with them. And so we're quite selective. And again, I feel for the actual vendors, the new vendors, if you will, trusted vendors. It takes a while to establish that. But once that partnership has been established, certainly there's work to maintain that trust. But then also there is benefits, if you will, to that continued relationship.
What's the next step?
Harrison Bertrand, senior consultant, said, quote, "Why are we depending on founders or startups to solve our problems? There's still a myriad of problems we can't solve, and no new toy will solve them. All we need from them are tools that are fit for purpose, that are able to execute our policies and are able to give us the metrics we desire as we manage risk. We'll be much better off if we able to architect better policies. The problems are on us, and with our current toys, we can have much success. Stop shifting the problems to the vendors, founders, startups." Now, I would say the vendors, founders, startups would want you to shift their problems to them so they can get the money. That would be my theory. But Eli Wasserman of Iron Point said, quote, "I found that the product space is hyper-crowded and there's a gap for service-based organizations. Customers don't want more tools. Rather, they'd love a human, emphasis not on a robot, to help them navigate these issues. Have a sense of humor, be engaging, join them in their journey. Customers will pay top dollar for an experience versus just a product." I like that last line. What do you think? Would you agree with that, Mary Rose? You want top dollar for an experience versus just a product?
Absolutely. Again, this goes back to what Eddie just said. They need to understand our business. So part of that is the experience of empathizing, learning, understanding what it is that the problems that we're trying to solve in order for them to identify how they in fact can help and not just shove a tool to us. But back to the other quote, right? It's really not just about tools, right? The old adage still holds. People, process, technology, that holds. Even with this, even in the world of AI, people can still be human plus agent. Processes will still remain, but they might have to be reimagined. It's still the same old adage, people, process, and technology. It's not all about tools. Now, that said, you could use founders and startups as a source of creative thought. Right? Don't rely on them, but certainly there's some creativity there because they're looking at things, or trying to at least, from out of the box thinking, right? And sometimes we are, sort of pigeonholed into what we know and what we're familiar with. And it's good to engage with some founders and startups as thought provokers. Now, again, like I said, they cannot be their only source of creative thinking. But the bottom line is it's incumbent upon us CISOs to be educated, to educate ourselves on not only our business and what we need to do, on potential solutions with our founders, what needs to be done. It's back to understanding our own environment. And if we do that, we would maybe perhaps drive the market where it needs to be. And if we blindly rely on vendors, there will be a market for snake oil for sure, because we're just blindly relying on them and then agreeing to what they're saying. So avoid buying a solution for a non-existent problem or a low risk area. Understand your environment, understand your business, the objectives and the risks that those introduce, and then find what's appropriate for you.
This comes up all the time that, the vendors want you to believe that you buy a solution, solve all your problems. But the other thing that we've heard is that every buyer feels like they're a special snowflake. So every vendor has to treat every potential buyer like with kid gloves and give them a custom solution. Like, the market's complicated everywhere, isn't it, Eddie?
David, I am special, David, and I want vendors to know that, right? I think we also have to understand where the vendors are coming from, right? There's thin lines when it comes to revenue, and you have to build a product that's meant for the masses. And so, of course, it's not going to hit the fringes of what you want it to do. It's going to be for whatever the masses think is appropriate. And so, yes, you're right. The fringes make every company unique and a snowflake. But at the heart of the problem, it's probably similar. There's probably some similarities there. How you solve it will be unique, but the product is a part of that conversation, and the vendor should be part of that storyboard. I like what Mary Rose said, right? Which is, when you're thinking about low risk areas, are you overspending on solving a problem that may not be too risky? And I think that's what the vendors have to understand as well, right? If they have a really good product, is it your most important area for the year? Is it on your near-term horizon? Or is this something that people have been living with for some time and they've just been accustomed to doing? So, I think they have to understand not only what the value they bring to their customers, they also have to understand timing-wise, is this a problem that people have just been used to and it's not really too disruptive, because you can't spend a lot of money on fixing those types of problems.
When Eddie talked about vendor serving to the masses, they're trying to serve to the masses. Can I make a plug for SMBs? Let's go back to our SMB question or quote earlier on. Focus on them. That's a whole different area, it's a whole different market, and they'll have different needs. Then again, like I said, the platinum plated or gold plated, whatever that they provide to the bigger organizations.
Let me ask you a question. Have either of you ever purchased a product because of one of your partner SMB companies had something, you talked to the security people over there, and then you brought it into your environment? Did that ever happen?
I could say yes. I trust CISOs, right? And if they said, hey, I've been doing this, and we vent to each other, and they said, I got this vendor you got to talk to, I will take that call in a heartbeat, and within 3 months, we're signing contracts.
Because you trust your colleagues, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And same with you, Marriott?
Yeah, same thing. I take recommendations from other CISOs. Frankly speaking, I pass it on to my team because they're way more intelligent than I am in terms of validating market products and then whether it fits their needs and whether it solves a problem. But certainly that is, back to Eddie's comment, CISOs are a community. It's a community that I love actually being in this space. But yes.
Do not ignore those SMBs, because those SMBs, vendors speaking to you, are going to talk to the enterprises. Talk to them. Treat them well. All right. This brings us to the portion of the show, Mary Rose, where I'm going to ask you first, which of all these quotes was your favorite and why?
I'm going to go back to the SMBs. Mark Furman and Jeremy Turner. We have to do better in servicing SMBs. I'm making this plug, like I said, plug for the SMBs because they are part of, well, like I said, half of the global GDP, and they are part of the supply chains of large companies as well. So don't just focus on us large companies.
Good point. There's this obsession with if we can get your logo on a slide deck, kind of a thing. Which, by the way, most buyers could care less about those logos on a slide deck.
That's actually so true, because if there's a logo in a slide deck, I will call the CISO of that logo and say, okay, really, what's it like?
I think we had a call with them once. All right, Eddie, your favorite quote and why?
I'm going to go with Eli on this. And it's really the last part of this quote. It's about the experience, right?
And we're not talking about golf outings,
We're not talking about golf outings or steak dinners. I'm talking about we're a partner and I want you to feel my pain, right? And so if I have a vendor that disappears during duress, you're not a great partner. If I have to true up with you every 3 weeks, you're not a partner. If you're somebody that truly understands my part, like an employee would, you understand my pay points, you understand my successes and failures. For me, that experience goes a long way, because now you are somebody that I can rely on, and I need to rely on my partner. So building that relationship is important for me.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to the tail end of the show. I want to thank our sponsor, and that would be ActiveState, secure open source software for the AI coding era. Check them out at activestate.com. Get the secure fast lane for your staff and have an audit trail. That's with activestate.com. Go check them out. And when you do, let them know you heard about them from the CISO series. I want to thank you, Eddie, as always. You are hiring, correct?
We are, yes.
And I believe, Mary Rose, you are also hiring, correct?
That is correct.
So go to the Marathon Petroleum site. I believe you have a job board there, yes, of some sort?
If not, they're on LinkedIn post as well.
Go check out their job board, and you will find some positions open there. Thank you very much, Mary Rose. Thank you very much, Eddie. And thank you to our audience. We greatly appreciate your contributions and for listening to Defense in Depth.
We've reached the end of Defense in Depth. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss yet another hot topic in cybersecurity. This show thrives on your contributions. Please write a review, leave a comment on LinkedIn or on our site, CISOseries.com, where you'll also see plenty of ways to participate, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@CISOseries.com. Thank you for listening to Defense in Depth.